He staggered through the doorway with blood soaking his shirt, barely standing on his own. And when his eyes found hers, everything inside him broke. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "I came home." Moments earlier, Giovanni Moretti, her ex-husband, the man she once fled, had walked into a cartel ambush to protect the son he never knew existed. Now he stood in her living room, wounded, trembling, and still trying to shield them both from a world built on danger and secrets. Before we begin, if you believe a parent's love can defy even the darkest world, make sure to subscribe. It's free and helps us share more stories from Desire Tales. The diaper bag slipped off my shoulder again just as my key missed the lock for the third time. Luca whimpered against my chest, his tiny fist clenched in the fabric of my olive green blouse like he was afraid the world might give way if he let go. Maybe he was right. Inside, the apartment felt like a fridge someone forgot to stock. The air was stale, thin, the kind of cold that got into your bones instead of your skin. I'd forgotten to adjust the thermostat before work. One more thing on a list that never stopped growing. Dishes in the sink, laundry in the basket, emails unanswered. Single motherhood wasn't waves. It was a tide that never receded. I was always ankle-deep in something I hadn't done yet. I slipped Luca into his playpen, watched his small body lean toward the plastic rings dangling from the padded edge. 7 months old, almost 8, and already trying to pull himself up like gravity was just a rumor. His dark hair stuck up in soft, wild tufts. His deep brown eyes locked onto mine, and just like every time I saw him, Giovanni. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a silence so heavy it felt like drowning in luxury. 15 months since the divorce. 15 months since I walked out of that gilded mausoleum and tried to learn how to breathe again. My phone buzzed on the counter. Jessica, probably. She'd been texting since noon because I'd mentioned Luca was fussier than usual. I ignored it and grabbed the bottle I'd prepped before work, sliding it into the microwave. The low hum filled the apartment, a poor replacement for company but better than the oppressive quiet. Boston had seemed like salvation when I chose it, far enough from New York that I wouldn't accidentally run into Giovanni at some charity gala, close enough to a real city that I could rebuild a career. Mid-sized corporate law firm. Decent title. Forgettable pay. The kind of job that kept the lights on and nothing else. Rent was due next week. My checking account balance had started to feel like a joke I wasn't in on. Luca's cry cut through the room, sharp, high, not just cranky. A sound that hooked into my spine and yanked. I grabbed the warm bottle and scooped him up, pressing him close. He latched immediately, greedy little pulls, but his forehead brushed my chin and my whole body went cold. Too hot. I pressed my lips to his temple the way my mother used to check my temperature when I was a kid, before the accident, before family became something you only saw in other people's holiday photos. Luca's skin burned beneath my mouth. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, carrying him to the bathroom with my heart pounding in my throat. "Just a little fever. We'll get medicine." But my voice didn't fool me. I'd given him infant acetaminophen 2 hours ago. The fever should be drifting down, not climbing. The thermometer beeped with clinical indifference. 103.2 degrees Fahrenheit. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped my phone as I balanced him on my hip, typing symptoms with my thumb. Every result Google threw at me was a horror show: meningitis, sepsis, brain damage. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. I called the pediatrician. Voicemail. After 6 on a Friday. Of course. My phone lit up again. Jessica. This time I picked up. "Lauren, I've been trying to reach you. What's wrong?" "Luca has a fever," I said, staring at the glowing numbers on the thermometer like they might rearrange themselves. 103.2. He's not right. My voice cracked on the last word. "Take him to the ER. Now." Don't wait. She was right. I knew she was right. But I thought about the bill before I thought about the drive. Copays I couldn't afford, forms asking about the father I'd erased on paper, the way the world looked at a woman doing this alone. It all sat on my chest like a weight. Lauren, are you listening? Yeah, I whispered. I'm going. I stuffed the diaper bag with shaking hands, extra clothes, the chewed-to-death stuffed rabbit, my wallet, insurance card, keys. The elevator was broken again because of course it was. I took the stairs 4 flights down, counting each step just to keep myself from unraveling. By the time I reached the street, Luca's cries had dwindled into weak, breathy whimpers that scared me more than the screaming had. Outside, Boston's October night had teeth. The sky split open as I reached the car, rain slamming into my blouse, soaking me through in seconds. I strapped Luca into his car seat, checking the buckle twice with clumsy fingers. His eyes were half closed, his body limp in a way no healthy baby ever should be. Stay with me, Luca, I choked out as I slammed the door. Please stay with me. The hospital was 12 minutes away. I made it in 8, running 2 red lights I barely registered. Let the city send me tickets. Let them suspend my license. None of it mattered if the tiny boy in the back seat stopped breathing. The ER entrance glowed bright and harsh against the storm, a fluorescent promise of help that I clung to with both hands. I burst through the automatic doors, rain and tears blurring my vision. I need help, I called out, voice breaking. My son has a high fever. He's not responding normally. The triage nurse took one look at Luca and didn't waste time on questions. Suddenly there were hands and scrubs and voices firing information at me. Age, weight, any allergies, any complications at birth. Is the father present? Someone asked. I froze. 15 months of silence, of secrets, of telling myself I'd done the right thing by cutting Giovanni out of this part of my life. All of it slammed into me in one brutal second. No, I managed. It's just me. They wheeled Luca away behind double doors I wasn't allowed to follow. A nurse with kind eyes parked me in a plastic chair in a too bright room that smelled like disinfectant and fear. Someone will be with you shortly, she said. Try to stay calm. Stay calm. My world was 7 months old and on the other side of a door I couldn't open. Calm felt like a language I'd never learned. I sat there shivering in damp clothes, staring at a poster about hope and healing I wanted to rip off the wall. Hope didn't pay bills. Hope didn't fix fevers. Hope certainly didn't bring fathers back from the ghosts you'd turned them into. When the doctor finally walked in, young, tired, glasses smudged, his voice was gentle but not soft enough to cushion the blow. They needed to run tests. The fever was dangerous. Meningitis was on the table. A lumbar puncture. And for that, they needed a full medical history. Not just mine. His. Blood type. Genetic conditions. Immune disorders. Anything. My ex-husband's face flashed across my mind like a photograph I'd tried to burn. Strong jaw, dark eyes, that small scar on his chin from a fight he'd never explained. Giovanni Moretti, the man I'd married, the world I'd run from, the danger I'd tried to keep my son out of by erasing his name from every form. Is there any way to reach the father? The doctor asked quietly. It could change how we treat your son. My throat closed, but the answer rose anyway. For 15 months the answer had been no. Tonight, staring at the door my baby had disappeared through, it shifted into something else. I can try, I heard myself say. I might be able to get his number. And just like that, the life I'd built on distance and denial started to crack, making room for the one man I'd sworn I'd never call again. I stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering above me like they were trying to decide whether to stay alive or give up entirely. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped my phone. 15 months. 15 months of silence, of deleting everything that tied me to him, of convincing myself that distance equaled safety. All of it collapsed the moment a doctor said the words meningitis and lumbar puncture. My old divorce attorney would still have his number. She kept everything. Contracts, emails, receipts. Her world thrived on records, and I was suddenly grateful for it. I dialed her cell. She picked up on the fourth ring, voice thick with exhaustion. "Lauren, is everything all right?" "I need Giovanni's number," I said, pacing a narrow path between vending machines that hummed like dull machines in a dream. "It's an emergency." A pause. The kind of pause filled with judgment and questions she didn't voice. "Lauren, reopening that door isn't wise." "My son is in the hospital," I snapped, breath catching. "They need the father's medical history. Please." 5 minutes, she said. Those minutes stretched until I could hear my pulse in my ears. When the text came through, just 10 digits, I stared at them like they were a gun. I'd once known that number better than I knew my own birthday. Now it felt like a detonator. I dialed point 1, ring point 2, point 3, then his voice, lower than I remembered, rough, alert in that way he always had been, like danger lived in his bloodstream. "Who is this?" Every version of this moment I'd rehearsed over 15 months vanished. Strength, composure, dignity all gone. "It's Lauren," I whispered. "I need to tell you something." Silence stretched, thick, dangerous, familiar. I could almost see him mentally cataloging threats the way he used to, calculating whether this call meant blood on the floor. "How did you get this number?" "That doesn't matter," I said, my voice cracking. "Giovanni, I need your medical history. Now." He scoffed, confused. "Why the hell?" Their doors burst open. Dr. Sullivan stepped into the hall, urgency carved into every line of his face. He tapped his watch. Time was slipping. "Because our son is in the hospital," I blurted, my heart tearing itself open. "He has a 103 fever, they think it might be meningitis, and they need your information before they do a spinal tap." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was explosive. The kind of silence that lived right before the world breaks in half. "What did you just say?" Giovanni's voice wasn't raised. Didn't need to be. The steel underneath was enough to freeze me in place. We have a son. His name is Luca. He's 7 months old." My throat tightened. "And he's very sick." Another long breath on the other end. Not disbelief, calculation. Anger. Fear. All braided together. "Where are you?" "Boston General Hospital." "Don't move." His voice sharpened into command. "I'll be there in 3 hours." "That's impossible." "It's a 4-hour. I said 3. He inhaled, clipped and cold. "Give the phone to the doctor." My hands shook as I passed the phone to Dr. Sullivan. The doctor stepped away, listening, responding, absorbing information like he was being briefed by a general. "AB negative, extremely rare, yes sir, yes, we'll prepare." Then he handed the phone back to me with eyes that had completely changed. "Mr. Moretti is on his way," he said carefully. "He's bringing a medical team." He hesitated. "Miss Grant, who exactly is your ex-husband?" I opened my mouth, closed it. There was no version of the truth I could say in a hospital hallway. Not one that didn't sound like stepping into a different universe. "He's very connected," I finally whispered. "And he has resources." The doctor nodded slowly, understanding more than I'd said. In the tiny waiting room, everything felt too bright, too loud, too fragile. Luca was somewhere behind those doors. Giovanni was racing toward us through a storm he was likely trying to outrun. And the life I'd built since leaving him, an entire life shaped around the idea of never seeing him again, was cracking like thin glass. I pressed my palms together and whispered into the quiet, "Please get here in time." because whether I admitted it or not, the moment I heard his voice, I already knew everything was about to change. The storm outside the hospital didn't let up. Rain pounded the windows in angry sheets, rattling the glass like impatient fists. Hours bled together in that too-bright waiting room where time had no mercy, stretching and tightening until every second felt carved into my skin. Luca was somewhere behind a wall I couldn't cross, and I'd never felt more useless or more afraid. A nurse checked on me once, maybe twice, I couldn't tell. Every time she asked if I needed anything, I shook my head because what I needed wasn't something she could bring through a door. I stared at the empty corridor, at the echo of footsteps that never belonged to him, and prayed that Giovanni was cutting through the night like he always cut through everything. Ruthless, relentless, unstoppable, but beneath that prayer lived something darker. A question I didn't want to confront. What kind of man shows up in 3 hours during a storm that shuts down highways? A man who bends the world to his will. A man who shouldn't have been part of mine anymore. I didn't hear him at first. I felt him. The way pressure shifts before a storm hits. Raised voices erupted near the entrance, the kind our staff reserved for unruly drunks and emergencies that threatened protocol. But this wasn't panic. It was resistance, the futile kind. I stood, my body lifting before my mind caught up, and then I saw him. Giovanni Moretti strode through the automatic doors like he'd been carved from the thunder outside. Black suit, rain dripping down his shoulders, dark hair slicked back, eyes sharp enough to cut through the fluorescent glare. 3 men followed. Private doctors, security, ghosts from a world I'd once lived beside without ever truly seeing. His presence swallowed the air whole. Conversations halted. Nurses froze. Even the storm seemed to quiet long enough to watch him enter. But he only saw one thing. Me. His gaze locked onto mine across the chaos, and something in his expression shifted. Fury riding shotgun with fear so raw I barely recognized it. Giovanni had once faced down men who would kill without blinking. I had never seen him look afraid of anything. Except now. Except for this. Except for Luca. He closed the distance in seconds, moving the way he always did, like the world belonged to him and dared anyone to disagree. Standing this close again knocked the air from my chest. I'd forgotten how tall he was. How his presence filled a space until there was no room left for doubt. Where is he? The question came out low, dangerous, threaded with something breaking beneath the steel. They're doing the lumbar puncture, I said, my voice barely holding together. We have to wait. Show me. Giovanni, they won't let you back there. There are protocols. I don't give a damn about their protocols, he snapped, stepping in closer. The smell of rain and cedar clung to him, pulling me back into memories I'd sworn to bury. That's my son, and I'm not standing in a waiting room while he's alone. He's not alone, I whispered. He has doctors, nurses. He doesn't have his father, Giovanni said, voice dropping into something that broke me open. Or his mother. 15 months of silence collapsed between us like it had never existed. All the reasons I'd run, all the fears that pushed me out of his world, they flared beneath his eyes. 15 months, Lauren, he said quietly, the storm inside him gathering force. You kept my son from me for 15 months. I had reasons. My breath shook. You said you didn't want children. I said children are targets in my world. I said children are leverage. He stepped even closer, and for a moment I saw the man beneath the ruthless edge. I never said I didn't want them. I said I couldn't risk them. There's a difference. Before I could answer, Dr. Sullivan appeared, his voice tight. Mr. Moretti? Giovanni's posture shifted instantly. Rage folded into cold, precise control. Take me to my son. The doctor nodded. The procedure is complete. He's stable. Both of you can see him now. We walked down the hall together, side by side for the first time in over a year, each step heavy with the past and trembling with the future. Somewhere ahead, our son was waiting, and with every stride, I felt the ground shift under my feet, because Giovanni wasn't a door I could close again. He was a storm stepping back into my life. The hallway felt impossibly long, each fluorescent light humming like a heartbeat out of sync with my own. Giovanni walked beside me in silence, but the air around him pulsed with barely contained tension. His steps were precise, predatory, each one charged with a purpose that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with fear. Real fear. The kind he'd never allow anyone but me to see. Dr. Sullivan guided us through a maze of sterile corridors until we reached a small pediatric room. The door swung open, and the world narrowed to a single point. Luca lay in a hospital crib, tiny and pale beneath soft cartoon print blankets, connected to monitors that beeped with mechanical indifference. His dark hair curled damply against his forehead. His lashes trembled. He looked impossibly fragile, a flicker of a candle in a storm. I stepped inside first, but it was Giovanni who stopped the room from spinning. He froze in the doorway, not with hesitation, but with reverence so quiet and fierce it made my throat tighten. The storm that had followed him into the air seemed to dissolve, leaving something raw and unguarded in its wake. I watched him take the smallest step forward, like he feared the floor might collapse beneath him. Then another, and another, until he stood beside the crib, staring down at a child who had his exact dark eyes and the shape of his mouth. There was no need for DNA tests. Anyone could see the truth. But this truth hit harder than anything a lab could confirm. Giovanni's hand gripped the rail so tightly his knuckles turned white. His chest rose with a shaky breath I don't think he realized he'd taken. "Hello, Luca," he whispered, voice cracking open on the name. "I'm your father." I had never heard his voice sound like that. Not when he vowed loyalty to the men he commanded. Not during the heated arguments that tore our marriage apart. Not even when he told me he loved me for the last time before I left. This wasn't the voice of Giovanni Moretti, the man feared by half of New York. This was just a man standing in front of his son for the first time, terrified, grateful, broken open. Luca stirred, a small sound escaping his lips, and Giovanni's entire body leaned in as if drawn by instinct older than fear itself. He lifted a trembling hand, stopping just short of touching Luca's cheek, as though he wasn't sure he had the right. "He looks like you," I whispered. Giovanni didn't take his eyes off him. "No," he murmured. "He looks like us." His voice was reverent, certain, and full of regret so heavy it seemed to sit between us like another presence. For a moment, the room was silent except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the soft hum of machines keeping watch. Then Luca's tiny fingers curled around mine through the crib bars, and something inside Giovanni shattered. He bowed his head, letting out a quiet, unsteady exhale that trembled at the end. The kind of sound a man makes when realizing how much he's already lost, and how much he might still lose. "I'm never leaving him again," he said softly. "Ever." He didn't look at me when he said it. He said it to Luca, to himself, to whatever gods he believed in. But I felt the promise hit me like a pulse. Heavy, inevitable, dangerous in all the ways love can be. We stood there together watching our son breathe, the weight of the past settling and shifting between us. Something had changed in that room. Something we couldn't name yet, because Luca wasn't just a child now, he was the hinge on which all of our futures swung. And nothing about this was going to be simple ever again. The next 3 weeks unfolded in a blur of fluorescent lights, whispered updates, and the quiet terror that comes with waiting for a child to heal. Time lost its edges. Days blended into nights. My world narrowed to the rise and fall of Luca's breathing, and the numbers glowing on monitors. But even in that fog, one thing stayed constant. Giovanni never left. He moved into the hospital without asking permission, anchoring himself at Luca's bedside like he'd been doing it his whole life. His private medical team arrived within hours, men and women with crisp coats, clipped speech, and an efficiency that made the hospital staff stiffen. Yet they coordinated seamlessly with the pediatric specialists, catching details, adjusting treatment, pushing results faster. The fever held on for days, stubborn and punishing. But slowly, after endless nights of antibiotics, monitoring, and whispered prayers, Luca's color returned. His breathing eased. His grip grew stronger. Every small improvement landed in my chest like a fresh miracle. One night, somewhere between 1 a.m. and dawn, I found Giovanni asleep in a chair beside the crib, head tilted back, suit jacket draped over him like an afterthought, exhaustion carving shadows under his eyes. Even unconscious, he held Luca's tiny sock in one hand, knuckles still white with instinctive protectiveness. I stood in the doorway watching him, torn between gratitude and a grief I didn't have a name for. This was the version of him I'd wanted years ago, the man who showed up, who stayed, who cared. A man I thought didn't exist. But he existed. I was watching him. And that realization hurt more than any memory of our marriage. He didn't just stay physically, he inserted himself into every decision with laser focus. When doctors explained complications, he asked precise questions. When nurses changed shifts, he made sure they knew Luca's baseline stats. When I faltered from lack of sleep, he simply stepped in and took over, no judgment, no hesitation. But beneath all that steadiness ran another current, quiet, simmering, inevitable. Anger me to the months he'd missed, the secrets I had chosen over him. Sometimes I caught him staring at Luca with a kind of longing that bordered on pain. Other times, I caught him staring at me with questions I wasn't ready to answer. On day 19, Dr. Sullivan approached us with the news we'd been praying for. The meningitis was bacterial, treatable, caught early enough that Luca would recover fully. Relief hit me so hard I had to grip the back of a chair just to stay upright. Giovanni closed his eyes, exhaling a breath that sounded like release and regret tangled together. "Thank you," he told the doctor quietly, words rare enough in his mouth that they landed like a vow. 3 days later, we brought Luca home. But home didn't feel like home anymore. The small Boston apartment looked too cold, too cramped, too fragile for the child who'd nearly slipped through my fingers. Giovanni noticed everything the second he stepped inside. The second-hand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling, the thin walls, the stack of unpaid bills I'd shoved under a magazine, the exhaustion I wore like a second skin. He didn't say anything right away. He didn't have to. His silence was louder than any accusation. That evening, after Luca finally fell asleep in his crib, Giovanni stood in the center of my living room with a file in his hand. "I want custody," he said, voice controlled but edged with ice. "Full custody." The words sliced cleanly through the room, shifting everything between us in an instant. "You can't just—" "I can," he said calmly. "And I will." He opened the file. DNA tests. Financial documents. Forms I'd never filled out listing father unknown. Proof of instability. Proof he could do better. My stomach twisted. My heart rebelled. "You're punishing me." "I'm protecting my son," he said, jaw tight. "You made a choice 15 months ago. Now I'm making mine." But his voice wasn't cold. It wasn't calculated. It was wounded. A man trying to reclaim something he'd lost before he even knew it existed. I looked at Luca sleeping, cheeks soft and pink, tiny hands curled in peaceful fists. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew this wasn't the end of a fight. It was the beginning of a war. One neither of us could afford to lose. I stood frozen in the quiet of my own living room, staring at the custody papers spread across my coffee table like an indictment. Luca slept a few feet away, unaware that the world he'd woken up to might shift beneath him before morning. And Giovanni, still in his immaculate suit, tie loosened just enough to reveal the pulse ticking at his throat, watched me with the steady focus of a man who had already planned 10 steps ahead. "You can't take him from me," I whispered. The words came out thin, scraped raw. "I raised him alone. I kept him alive." You also kept him from me," Giovanni cut in, the restraint in his voice sharpening the edges of every syllable. "For 7 months. 7 months of first smiles, first sounds, first everything." His eyes flicked toward Luca's room, softening for a heartbeat before hardening again. "You chose that. Now I'm choosing something." He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Silence was always his most dangerous weapon. "You don't even want custody," I said, though my voice wavered. "You want revenge." His expression flickered hurt, anger, disbelief before settling into something colder. "I want my son safe. And your life." He gestured around the small, dim apartment. "This isn't safety. The water stain on the ceiling, the overworked heating unit, the stack of unopened bills, the exhaustion that lived under my skin. All of it suddenly felt glaringly visible in the space between us. I braced myself for the final blow, the declaration that he'd be taking Luca to New York immediately, that lawyers were already in motion, that this battle was his to win. But instead he closed the folder, set it down gently, and said something I did not expect. "Or," my breath caught. "Or," he repeated, quieter this time, "you come to New York with him." The offer hit me harder than any threat. He stepped closer, but not in the way he used to know: intimidation, no looming dominance. Just a man trying to steady ground that wouldn't stop shifting. "I can give him what he needs," he said, voice low but unflinching. "Security, stability, a medical team on call, a life where you're not choosing between groceries and daycare." My jaw clenched. "I don't want your money." "Then work for it." I blinked. "What?" "My companies need legal consultants." His eyes locked onto mine, unwavering. "Compliance, corporate contracts, you're good at that. Better than the lawyers I've hired." His tone softened, almost reluctantly. "You'd be paid fairly. More than fairly." The idea carved through me, equal parts tempting and terrifying. Work that wasn't soul-killing. Stability that wasn't borrowed. Support without begging. But it was also a tether. A bridge back to the man who had once loved me and failed me in the same breath. "And what?" I asked, breath uneven. "We just live near each other? Pretend the past didn't happen?" His jaw worked, a muscle ticking as he searched for words that didn't come easily to him. "I want our son in my life." "That's not an answer." "No," he said quietly. "It's not." I stepped back, shaking my head. "Giovanni, I can't raise Luca in your world. I left because you were right to," he said, surprising me. His voice dropped into something raw, stripped. "Because my world is dangerous. Because I shut you out. Because I didn't give you anything to hold on to." He took a slow breath. "But this isn't about us anymore. Your life and his life, they're tied to mine whether you want them to be or not. You can't protect him alone. Not from the things that come after me." A chill ran through me. "What things?" His eyes flicked away just for a second, but it was enough. He wasn't hiding the truth. He was trying to decide how much of it I could survive hearing. When he looked back at me, his expression was carved from certainty. "Come to New York," he said. "Let me protect him. Let me protect both of you." And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "You needed distance. I understand that now. But distance won't keep our son safe." The room felt too small for both of us, for the history between us, for the future he was offering, like it was the only road left. Maybe it was. I exhaled, long and unsteady. I need time to think. You have 48 hours, he said gently. Then I file for emergency custody. The threat wasn't cruel. It was real. And it terrified me because I knew he wasn't bluffing. Giovanni never bluffed. Still, when he left that night with one last glance toward Luca's room, I felt the ground shift beneath me in a way that wasn't entirely fear, because part of me already knew the truth. The battlefield had changed, and so had I. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I drifted in and out of shallow dreams, each one collapsing into the same looping thought. 48 hours. It pulsed behind my eyelids, tightening like a rope every time I tried to breathe. When the first weak light of morning slipped through the blinds, I felt Luca stir beside me in his portable crib, soft and warm and blissfully unaware of the war quietly forming around him. I lifted him, holding his small body close, feeling the weight of everything I stood to lose. Jessica called early, long before people with normal lives had even reached for coffee. Her name flashed across my screen like a warning. She never called twice. She'd called 3 times. I answered before the guilt could claw any deeper. "Where have you been?" she demanded, skipping the hello entirely. "You vanished. You're texting like someone is reading over your shoulder. Tell me what's going on." I hesitated, Luca warm against my chest. I wanted to lie. Pretend everything was fine. Pretend the storm outside my door wasn't about to swallow us whole. But Jessica had been my lifeline since before the divorce. She knew every fracture in my voice. I couldn't fake calm for her, not today. "Giovanni wants custody," I said quietly. "Full custody." She inhaled sharply. "Absolutely not. Lauren, he doesn't get to walk back into your life and dictate your future because he suddenly feels like it." I closed my eyes, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple," she snapped, her voice rising like she could pull me back to shore by sheer force. "You left because he shut you out, because his life was dangerous, because he made you feel small. Nothing about that has changed." "Some of it has," I whispered before I could stop myself. "He stayed at the hospital. He never left Luca's side. Don't romanticize bare minimums," she cut in, frustration threading through every word. "Being present in a crisis doesn't erase the years he wasn't." Her words landed like cold water. She was right. And yet, the memory of Giovanni leaning over Luca's crib broken open, terrified, kept flashing behind my eyes. A man I didn't recognize. A man I hadn't believed existed. "He offered a compromise," I said, voice low. "Move to New York. Work for him. Raise Luca together." "Oh my God," Jessica breathed, stunned. "Lauren, that's not a compromise, that's a cage with central heating." I flinched because I'd thought the same thing the night before. But then I remembered the bills on my table. The water stain. The fear of walking home late. The fever thermometer stuck at 103.2. The doctor saying meningitis. And for the first time in months, I saw clearly just how close I'd been to losing everything. "What if he's right?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "What if Luca is safer with him?" Jessica went quiet, but it wasn't hesitation, it was heartbreak. "Safe isn't just walls and guards and expensive doctors," she said softly. "Safe is knowing the man who protects your child won't become the reason you lose yourself." I pressed my forehead to Luca's. He giggled, touching my cheek with a tiny palm sticky from teething. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not of Giovanni. Of choosing wrong." "That's why I'm here," she said. "To remind you that your life doesn't have to orbit around his gravity." Her faith in me was a lifeline. But even as she spoke, The image of Giovanni standing in the doorway the night before, determined, furious, vulnerable, rose again. And I realized something I hadn't said out loud. I don't think he's just doing this out of anger, I whispered. I think he's trying. Trying isn't enough, Jessica said gently. But sometimes I thought, watching Luca reach for the sunlight on the wall, sometimes trying is all a person can do before the world changes again. After we hung up, I stood in the middle of my living room holding Luca, staring at the file Giovanni had left behind. Custody. Employment. A place in his world. A place I wasn't sure I wanted and wasn't sure I could refuse. The truth settled over me like a slow dawn. Jessica was right about who he'd been. But she didn't know who he was becoming. And I was beginning to realize I didn't know either. Not anymore. By the next morning, the 48 hours Giovanni had given me felt like they were already evaporating. Every minute carried a weight I couldn't shake, like time itself was watching to see which way I would break. I tried to busy myself with simple things: warming a bottle, folding laundry, wiping down the counter, but none of it quieted the pressure tightening around my ribs. Luca crawled across the living room rug, babbling to his stuffed rabbit as if the world wasn't shifting beneath us. I envied him the innocence. I envied him the silence. When the knock came at 10 a.m., it wasn't timid. It wasn't hesitant. It echoed through my apartment like a verdict. I opened the door to find a tall man in an unassuming suit, too plain to be corporate, too crisp to be casual. His face was forgettable by design, the kind of face you'd walk past without realizing you'd been watched. "Miss Grant?" he asked, voice steady. I nodded. "I'm Special Agent Thomas Reed. FBI Organized Crime." My stomach dropped. It wasn't fear of the law that made my hands shake, just the knowledge that any mention of Giovanni and the FBI in the same sentence meant danger more intricate than anything I'd been willing to imagine the night before. Reed stepped inside only when I allowed it, closing the door behind him with clinical precision. "We've received some anonymous tips regarding cartel movements along the Boston docks," he said, looking around my apartment as if reading my life off the furniture. "Tips that match patterns we've been tracking. Patterns that suggest someone with knowledge of Giovanni Moretti's world is feeding us information." I froze, the breath punched out of me. "I don't know what you're talking about." "That's what I expected you to say," he replied calmly, sliding a folder onto my table. Inside were surveillance photos, grainy but unmistakable, of Giovanni entering my building, carrying Luca, looking more like a man who owned the street than one who walked it. "Miss Grant, I know you were married to him. And I know you have a child together." My heart stopped. "How?" "We connect dots for a living." Reed folded his hands. "And right now we need more dots." I held Luca tighter. "Why are you here?" "Because the cartel Dinaloa is expanding north. They've already clashed with Moretti's organization. If this escalates, Boston becomes a battlefield." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You and your son are collateral the cartel would love to exploit." A chill ran up my spine. "So what do you want from me?" His eyes sharpened. "Information." I laughed short, disbelieving, bitter. "I can't spy on the father of my child." "You don't need to spy," he said. "Just observe. Tell us when something shifts. Movements. Meetings. Anything unusual. I won't put Luca in danger." "Not doing this puts him in more danger," Reed countered. "If the cartel decides Moretti needs to be taken off the board, they won't come after him directly. They'll come after what he loves." His gaze flicked to Luca. The implication was a knife. I paced the room, one hand gripping the edge of the table like I needed something solid to hold me upright. Reed spoke again, softer this time. "You're not choosing sides, Miss Grant. You're choosing survival." I stopped. "And if Giovanni finds out?" "Then you tell him you did it for your son." Reed's tone didn't change, but the meaning behind it did. A man like Moretti understands leverage better than love. Use that. The words hit me harder than any accusation. Not because they were cruel, because they were true. At the door, Reed paused. Think about my offer. And be careful. He handed me a card with an encrypted number. When you're ready, call. When the door closed, the silence felt sharper than his warnings. Luca reached out from my arms, grabbing the edge of my shirt, tugging me back to the moment I couldn't escape. Because this was no longer about custody. Or Pride.it was about war, one I'd never meant to join. And for the first time, I realized I might have to choose between the father of my child and the world determined to destroy him. I didn't call Reed back that day. I didn't call Giovanni either. Instead, I spent the next 24 hours moving through my apartment like someone wading through smoke, half blind, half breathless, carrying Luca on my hip while the weight of two worlds pressed against my spine. Every choice in front of me felt like a doorway leading to fire. And yet, by the time Giovanni returned the next evening punctual in a way that wasn't politeness but strategy, one already knew what answer lived inside me. He stood in my living room like he had a right to the air inside it, the faintest edge of impatience carved into his jaw. Luca squealed when he saw him, reaching from my arms toward the man he somehow recognized without memories to guide him. Giovanni's expression softened just for a breath before shifting back into the guarded neutrality he wore like armor. Have you decided? I could have stalled, lied, begged for more time. But Luca whispered the truth by simply being in my arms, warm, trusting, fragile. Yes, I said quietly. Giovanni didn't move, but something in the room did. And we'll come with you. To New York. The relief that flickered across his face was subtle but unmistakable, like the soft crack of thawing ice. But he covered it instantly. Good. Everything's already arranged. The next morning, black SUVs lined the street outside my building, their engines humming like restrained growls. Luca watched the commotion from my hip, fascinated by the men in dark suits loading our bags. My entire life fit into 4 boxes and 3 duffel bags, and every item I packed felt like closing a chapter one wasn't sure I'd fully written. Inside the SUV, the city blurred past in gray streaks. Boston shrinking behind us. The future drawing itself in sharp lines ahead. Giovanni rode in the car behind mine. I knew without looking. I felt him the way you feel a storm in the air before it arrives. New York rose like steel and ambition on the horizon. The apartment he brought us to was nothing like the one we'd shared during our marriage. The Manhattan penthouse was sharp lines and glass, perched above the city like a watchtower. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, security stationed in the lobby, cameras discreet but present, the kind that didn't ask, didn't blink, didn't forget. At first glance, it looked like luxury. But beneath the surface, I saw it clearly. This place wasn't designed for living. It was designed for defense. Giovanni walked me through the rooms, pointing out panic buttons disguised as light switches, doors reinforced with steel cores, exits mapped for quick evacuation. Everything choreographed, calculated, controlled. I understood then this wasn't him showing off. It was him saying, I will never allow weakness near you again. And for a few days it worked. Luca adjusted easily, crawling across rugs thick enough to hide his toys, laughing at his reflection in the towering windows. But when I finally ventured outside to a nearby playground, stroller rolling across uneven pavement, I noticed 3 men standing across the street. Not Giovanni's men. They watched too carefully, followed our movements with eyes that didn't belong to casual strangers. One had a tattoo curling up his neck, dark ink shaped like a symbol I didn't recognize. A warning. My heart stumbled. That night, I told Giovanni that he didn't raise his voice. He didn't panic. He simply stilled so completely the air around him seemed to hold its breath. Describe them. When I did, something shifted behind his eyes. Not fear. Something colder. Calculating. Starting tomorrow, you don't go back to that park. There's a private garden on the roof. Luca plays there from now on. Giovanni, I whispered, dread crawling up my spine. What's happening? He hesitated, rare, alarming, then answered with a bluntness that cut clean. They know about him. Who? The cartel. The room tilted. They know about Luca? They know I have a son, he said. And that changes everything. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't disguise it, didn't offer comfort where none existed. Before, I was simply an obstacle in their expansion. Now I'm a man with a weakness they can exploit. Luca babbled softly in his crib, oblivious to the shadow lengthening over his small world. Giovanni looked at him with a mix of devotion and guilt. We can't stay here anymore. Tomorrow you both move to my primary residence in Westchester. It's the only place I can guarantee safety. My throat tightened. You want us to live with you? I want our son alive, he said. And the safest place he can be is under the same roof as me. His voice didn't tremble. Mine did. But the decision once again didn't feel like a choice. Felt like gravity. And by morning we were following it. Because some battles you choose, others choose you, and this one had just redrawn the map under our feet. The convoy pulled into Westchester just after sunrise, engines rumbling low against the quiet sprawl of manicured land and towering trees. 40 acres of quiet, Giovanni had said. But the moment the gate slid open, smooth, silent, automatic, I understood the truth. This wasn't an estate. It was a fortress disguised as a dream. The house rose out of the landscape like something carved from power itself, stone, glass, steel, and a kind of cold beauty that belonged to men who never expected to sleep peacefully. Morning light washed over the long front steps, glinting off security cameras disguised as ornamental fixtures. Guards moved with the unbroken rhythm of people who lived by training, not instinct. Giovanni was already waiting on the steps. He opened my door before the SUV fully stopped, lifting Luca from his car seat with a gentleness that didn't match the razor line of his jaw. Welcome home, he said, voice low but steady. The word home hit me like a bruise I didn't know I had. Inside, the house was all clean lines and curated silence. Marble countertops, tall windows, modern art that didn't quite soften the edges of the space. But tucked among the carefully placed objects were traces of our past, pieces I hadn't expected him to keep. The painting from Milan. The coffee table we'd chosen during one of the few easy weeks of our marriage. Small artifacts of a life abandoned too quickly. I have rooms ready, he said, guiding me upstairs. Luca's is here. Yours is across the hall. I blinked. I thought you'd put me on the opposite side of the house. He met my eyes without wavering. He wakes at night. You need to be close. A beat. And so do I. But it wasn't the beauty of the house that struck me. It was the details behind it. Reinforced doors disguised beneath elegant wood paneling. Keypads hidden beneath decorative covers. Panic buttons nested beside electrical outlets. This home wasn't built to be comfortable. It was built to survive what lived outside its walls that night. After Luca fell asleep in his new crib beneath soft mobile lights, I stood in the hallway listening to the silence, too perfect, too curated. A silence designed by fear, maintained by force, and for a moment doubt coiled in my chest. Had I saved my son? Or only placed him in a different kind of danger, one with marble floors and impeccable security and a man who could kill with the same precision he could hold a child? I didn't get long to dwell on it, because at 3 a.m. the nightmares began. I woke gasping, disoriented, the edges of a dream still clawing at my throat, men breaking in, voices whispering threats, Luca crying somewhere I couldn't reach. The dark swallowed the room in heavy quiet. I couldn't sit still. I slipped into the hallway, sank to the floor outside Luca's room, heart banging against my ribs. I didn't hear Giovanni approach. He moved like someone taught to be a shadow, but I felt him the moment he stopped beside me. "How long have you been sitting here?" he asked softly. "I don't know. An hour." He crouched next to me, eyes tired but sharp. "The same dream." I nodded. "It's not irrational," he murmured. "It's your instincts protecting him." He offered me his hand. "Come on. You can't sit on the floor all night." I let him pull me up, too exhausted to pretend I wasn't unraveling. He led me to his study, warm light, mahogany shelves, leather chairs. A contrast to the sterile perfection of the rest of the house. A room that smelled like him. Cedar, smoke, something darker underneath. He poured me whiskey. I took it with shaking hands. "I can't sleep," I admitted. "Any sound. I think it's someone breaking in." "Normal ended the day you married me," he said quietly. "And it ended again the day Luca was born." There was no arrogance in his voice. No pride. Just truth. I studied him across the desk, the man who had once felt impossible to decipher, now looking almost human in the dim light. Shadows under his eyes. Tension in his shoulders. A weariness I'd never seen because I'd never been close enough to look. "Do you have nightmares?" I asked. His lips curved, not in amusement but in resignation. "Every night for the last 20 years. He hesitated, then added, "About losing the things that matter." Silence pressed between us, not empty but charged, heavy with all the words neither of us had been brave enough to speak. And then, as if pulled by gravity, he looked straight at me. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "things get more complicated." His words lingered in the dark like a warning, a promise, and a door opening all at once. The night blurred into something half awake, half dreamed, a limbo where fear lived just beneath my skin. By the time the first gray light crept through the curtains, I hadn't slept more than an hour. But I wasn't alone. Giovanni sat across from me in that leather chair, elbows on his knees, watching the window the way a soldier watches the horizon for incoming fire. Luca's cry drifted from the monitor. Soft, restless. Instantly Giovanni was on his feet. "I'll get him." His voice was steady, but I could hear the thin thread of fatigue under it. I followed him anyway. Not out of mistrust, out of instinct. He lifted Luca with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime training for precision. Our sun melted against him, thumb in mouth, curls sticking to his warm forehead. "Bad dream," he murmured, swaying with a rhythm he probably didn't remember learning. The tenderness in his voice did something to me, something I wasn't ready to name. "He settles faster with you," I whispered. Giovanni didn't look away from Luca. "Because he knows I'd burn the world down for him." He didn't say for both of you. He didn't have to. Over the next few days a strange rhythm formed. Mornings were cautious, afternoons were tense, and nights were heavy with the weight of truths neither of us wanted to face. But underneath it all there was something new. Or maybe something old finally resurfacing. One afternoon, as I reviewed compliance documents in the home office he'd set up for me, Giovanni stepped in holding Luca, who was giggling in a way that made the entire house feel softer, safer. He took 3 steps. Giovanni announced, pride brightening the edges of his usually controlled voice. 3. I gasped. "That's," he nodded. "Determined. Stubborn. Just like his mother." The warmth in his eyes when he looked at me lasted only a moment, but it lingered long after. That night, when Luca finally surrendered to sleep, Giovanni found me in the library. The shelves towered over us like carved shadows. He sat across from me, lowering himself carefully, the kind of careful that only came from living too long with danger. "I've been thinking," he said. His gaze wasn't sharp tonight. It was searching. "About the way I handled things during our marriage." I didn't speak. "Not yet." "I shut you out," he continued. "Not because I didn't care, but because caring made you a liability, vulnerability, target." He swallowed hard, the confession scraping something raw. "My father taught me early that family is a weakness enemies exploit. So I built walls. Too many. Too high. Something inside me cracked, not from hurt, but from recognition." "Giovanni," I said softly, "you didn't let me in. I never knew what you were fighting, what you were fearing. That was the mistake." His voice dropped, steady but wounded. "Because while I kept the enemies away, I kept you away too." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again, repeating the posture I'd seen hours earlier. But this time the rigidity in his shoulders had softened. "No more secrets," he said. "Ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth." I tested him with the question no sane person would ask lightly. "How many people have you killed?" He didn't flinch. "3 directly. More than 20 through orders." Silence spread like ink. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Some." He held my gaze. "But not the ones who threatened what's mine." His honesty should have terrified me. Instead, it grounded me because for the first time he wasn't hiding behind power or distance. He was giving me the truth, even when it made him look monstrous. "What about us?" I asked quietly. "Do you regret our marriage?" Giovanni exhaled a long, slow breath that felt like the first crack in 20 years of armor. "I regret how I handled it," he said. "How I pushed you away. But marrying you?" His eyes didn't waver. "That was the only thing I did right." My heart stumbled at that exact moment. Luca stirred in the crib beside us, restless but safe. Giovanni rose instantly, lifting him with practiced ease as he held our son. A strange calm washed over me, a calm that terrified me more than any nightmare, because I was falling for him again, and this time, there would be no clean escape. Next came the night that changed everything, when truth deepened into something neither of us could control. It happened 3 nights later, quietly, inevitably, like gravity finally claiming what had been suspended for too long. The house was dark except for a single lamp glowing in Luca's hallway, casting a soft amber halo on the walls. I'd fallen asleep sitting on the floor outside his door again, exhaustion dragging me under. What woke me wasn't Luca. It was Giovanni. He crouched beside me, face shadowed, voice low but frayed around the edges. "You can't sleep like this every night," he murmured. "You'll break." "I'm already breaking." He didn't argue. He just reached out his hand the way someone offers a lifeline to a drowning woman. I took it without hesitation. He pulled me to my feet and guided me downstairs to the study, the same room where truths had begun to loosen the knots inside him. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the liquid catching the lamplight like amber fire. I drank mine in a single swallow, the burn grounding me in my own trembling skin. "I'm scared all the time," I whispered. "I hear one sound and I think they're here. I see shadows and imagine someone taking him." Giovanni leaned back, watching me with an attention so total it felt like touch. "That fear means you're a mother. Not weak. But it's destroying me." He shook his head once. "No. It's preparing you." Something broke loose then, not between us but around us. The space filled with the things we'd never said out loud. That I looked at him, really looked at him. His tired eyes, his slow breaths, the shadows under his cheekbones carved from decades of vigilance. He wasn't simply dangerous, he was exhausted by danger. He was a man who'd survived so much he didn't know how to be anything other than alert. And yet here he was, sitting with me at 3 in the morning, holding the weight of my fear like it was his own. "Do you want to know the truth?" he said quietly. "I do." He let out a breath. "I never stopped loving you. Even when I was pushing you away. Even when I didn't deserve you." Something inside me splintered open. "Giovanni!" He crossed the space between us in 2 steps, slow, deliberate, giving me time to stop him. I didn't. His fingers brushed my jaw, the way someone touches something precious for the first time in years. My breath caught. His forehead lowered until it rested against mine. "You don't have to love me back," he whispered. "Just don't walk away again." I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just leaned into him, the familiar heat of him unraveling memories I tried to bury. And when he kissed me, it wasn't hungry or urgent. It was gentle, tentative. Like a man asking for a second chance with his entire soul in his hands. We barely made it to his room. We stopped twice in the hallway, kissing like people starving for truth. By the time we reached his bed, the world outside the walls didn't matter anymore. What happened next wasn't about passion, it was about recognition, a return. A promise neither of us dared speak. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled like cedar and winter air, I lay with my head on his chest, listening to the heartbeat I thought I'd lost forever. That was when guilt hit me sharp and sudden, because I hadn't told him the truth, not about Agent Reed, not about the information I'd been passing, not about the trap I'd woven myself into. "I need to tell you something," I whispered. His arm tightened around me. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "Whatever it is, tomorrow." So I let silence win, just for one night. Just long enough to pretend I wasn't living in a house built from love, danger, and secrets stacked like explosives. But dawn was coming, and with it, the consequences of the line we'd just crossed. Giovanni was gone before sunrise. His side of the bed was still warm when I woke, the imprint of his body pressed into the sheets like a promise he meant to keep. A small note lay on the nightstand, written in his precise, disciplined handwriting. "Taking care of business. Be home for dinner." I promised that I held the note longer than I should have. It felt fragile, too fragile for the world he was walking into. I tried to be normal that morning. I fed Luca. I played with him on the nursery rug. I held him through his morning nap, listening to the tiny soft breaths of a child who had no idea danger had written his name on its list. But every tick of the clock scraped against my nerves. Every minute that passed was a thread stretching too thin. At noon, I couldn't sit still any longer. I pulled out the encrypted phone and messaged Agent Reed with shaking fingers. "Meeting happening now. Newark Industrial District. Warehouse complex off Route 1. Cartel in Moretti." His reply came instantly. "We're already there. Stay put, stay put, stay still, stay quiet." But how could I stay still when Giovanni was walking into a trap I'd helped illuminate? How could I stay quiet when everything inside me screamed? The call came at 1:15 p.m. not from Giovanni, from one of his men. "Mrs. Moretti," the voice said, formal, strained, rushed. "There's been an incident. The boss is hurt. We're bringing him back now." My knees nearly buckled. "How bad?" "Gunshot wound, left shoulder. He's conscious. Stable. But he needs medical attention we can't give in transit." "I'll prepare the house," I said, voice trembling but steady enough to function. I hung up and moved. Not with panic, with purpose. I called the private doctor on retainer, cleared the dining room table, laid out towels and medical supplies like I'd done it 100 times. Not zeroed it, told a guard to take Luca to the nursery and keep him there. Then I called Agent Reed. "He's hurt," I said. "The meeting was an ambush." "We know," Reed answered. "Multiple arrests in progress. Your intel was critical." "I don't care about the arrests," I snapped. "Just make sure they never come near him again." But part of me cared, part of me knew the intel I'd given had saved Giovanni's life, even if that truth would damn me later. When the SUVs finally appeared, black and sleek against the long driveway, the world around me narrowed to a single point. The rear door opening point. Two men half carried him. Giovanni. Bleeding, pale, jaw clenched so hard a vein pulsed at his temple. His shirt was soaked with blood, his breathing shallow but stubbornly even. When he saw me standing in the doorway, something in his expression cracked. "I kept my promise," he rasped, voice scraped raw. "I came home." The doctor arrived minutes later, moving with calm efficiency. Local anesthetic, forceps, stitches, bandages stained dark red. Giovanni didn't flinch once. Not until his eyes found mine, and even then, it wasn't pain that flickered there. It was something far more dangerous. Relief. A relief so deep it made my throat ache. For the next 3 days, the house ran on careful silence and whispered footsteps. Giovanni slept in short intervals. I checked his temperature, changed his bandages, held Luca on my lap while watching the rise and fall of his chest. And on the 3rd day, Agent Reed called. "The raids were successful," he said. 7 high-ranking members detained. The timing of the meeting helped us gather them in one location. I wanted to feel victorious. Instead, all I felt was the crushing weight of what I'd done. When I found Giovanni in his study an hour later, arm in a sling, jaw tight, eyes too clear for someone who'd lost that much blood, I knew the truth was coming before he even spoke. "We need to talk," he said. His voice didn't waver, mine did. "About what?" "How the FBI knew exactly where to be," he said quietly. "Exactly when to strike." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "Giovanni." He didn't raise his voice. That was what made it terrifying. "I know Lauren." He stepped closer. "I've known for 2 weeks." My pulse stopped. "How?" "One of my men saw you with Reed in Cambridge." His eyes locked onto mine. "And I had him investigated." Everything inside me threatened to collapse. But then he breathed out slowly, and what he said next was not what I expected. "You weren't gathering information on me. Only on the cartel." His voice softened barely. "But you should have told me." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I was trying to protect you. Protect Luca." "I know," he said. "That's the only reason I'm not furious enough to burn the world down." He stepped forward, his good hand lifting to my cheek. "But understand this, Lauren, I would rather face every enemy alive than ever lose you again." In his eyes, I saw the truth. The shot that hit his shoulder wasn't the one that almost killed him. It was the thought of never coming home to us, and for the first time, I believed he wasn't invincible, he was human, breakable, mine. But danger wasn't done with us. Not yet, because the cartel had made their move. And the fallout was only beginning. The next 4 weeks unfolded like recovery always does, slow, uneven, marked by small victories and quiet reckonings. Giovanni healed physically faster than he had any right to. The emotional wounds, those took longer. But neither of us pretended otherwise. Not now. Not after everything had been dragged into the light. The cartel raids dominated the news. Federal agents swarmed warehouses in 3 states. Mugshots filled headlines. Reporters speculated about the downfall of a major criminal network, unaware of the child who'd nearly become collateral, the man who'd walked into the line of fire, and the woman who'd helped dismantle an empire from the inside. Agent Reed called 3 days after the ambush. "The arrests are holding," he said. "We've crippled their East Coast operations. Internal conflict will keep them too busy to target Moretti for years." I should have felt relief, but my stomach twisted. "I didn't do this for the FBI," I told him. "I did it for my family." "I know," Reed said. His tone softened. "Just remember, when this is over, you still have choices. Whether to stay in that world or walk away from it." But when I hung up and found Giovanni asleep on the couch, arm in a sling, Luca curled against his uninjured side, both breathing in perfect, peaceful sync that I knew Reed was wrong that I'd already chosen. Giovanni confronted me fully the next evening. Though the conversation didn't go the way I'd rehearsed, he stood in his study, back straight, a man rebuilt through discipline and pain. "I'm not angry you worked with Reed," he said. "I'm angry you did it alone. I thought you'd see it as betrayal." "I did," he admitted. "But then I realized the truth." He stepped closer, eyes steady, voice stripped of every lie he'd once used to protect himself. "You were trying to save us. Even when you were terrified. Even when you didn't trust me to protect you." My breath shook. "Giovanni." He cupped my face gently, such a strange contrast to the scars on his knuckles. "If you want to testify against the cartel," he said quietly, "you should." Shock rippled through me. "You're okay with that?" "I'm okay with whatever keeps you and Luca alive," he said. "That includes working with the FBI, even if that makes my life more complicated." He didn't say the other part out loud. He didn't need to. He trusted me. Now. Finally. And for the first time it felt like we were on the same side of the battle instead of opposite ends of the war. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt earned, not ominous. Giovanni's legitimate businesses thrived now that no one was trying to kill him. His lawyers were relieved, his employees calmer. The house felt warmer, lived in. Less fortress, more home. He started joining me for breakfast each morning. He didn't miss Luca's naps or bedtime. He showed up at ultrasound appointments with a reverence that made my throat tighten. Our second child was growing stronger each day, a heartbeat filling the room like a promise none of us dared break. One night, I found him in the nursery assembling a new crib, refusing help, muttering curses at the instructions, determined in a way only a man trying to build something he'd never had could be. "Why are you doing it yourself?" I teased from the doorway. He looked up, a crooked smile tugging at his mouth. "Because I never built anything for Luca when he was born. I won't make that mistake again." It was one of those simple moments that split me open. The kind that stitched wounds instead of deepening them. Jessica visited for the first time in months. She walked into the Westchester estate braced for danger. And left realizing something she hadn't expected. Giovanni wasn't a myth or a monster. He was a man in love with his family, learning humility one scar at a time. "He's not what I imagined," she whispered to me later. "Still terrifying. Still intense. But he loves you. I can see it." I knew because he showed it in actions instead of words. I in protection instead of control. I in honesty instead of silence. 6 weeks after his recovery, he asked me to marry him again, not with diamonds or spectacle, but with a simple band and a vow spoken in the garden where Luca practiced kicking a soccer ball across winter grass. "I want a life with you," he said. "Not a cage. Not fear. A life. Together." And for the first time, the future didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like a home, a family, a world we'd built from ashes and stubborn hope. We married quietly, just us, Luca, Jessica, and 5 of Giovanni's most loyal men standing as witnesses. No chandeliers, no luxury, no lies. Only truth. Only love that had survived fire and come out tempered. The final sign came months later, when I found him watching our sleeping son with a softness I'd never seen before. "I almost lost both of you," he whispered. "But you gave me a second chance." "We gave each other one," I said. He nodded slowly. "And I won't waste it." The world outside still carried danger, but inside these walls we built something stronger. A family forged in fear, rebuilt by courage, and held together by a love that refused to die. And when our daughter kicked hard enough for him to feel through my shirt that night, he bent his head, kissed my belly, and whispered, "This time we begin right." Tomorrow would bring threats, challenges, new shadows. But for the first time in a long time, we were ready to face them together. 3 months after Giovanni's recovery, Life found a rhythm I never thought possible for USA rhythm, with edges still sharp but softened by the weight of everything we'd survived. Our days were no longer shaped by danger alone, but by choices we made deliberately, carefully, together. I spent most mornings in the legal department of Moretti Import-Export, reviewing compliance documents, rewriting contracts, reinforcing every line of language that kept his businesses clean and the FBI at a comfortable distance. From the third floor, the Hudson River cut a silver path through the skyline, a reminder of how far we'd come, and how deep the current ran beneath all of this. "Mrs. Moretti, there's a call for you on line 3, the receptionist said one afternoon. That IT still startled me sometimes, hearing that name again, but this time it didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. 6 weeks earlier, on a quiet morning in Westchester, we'd remarried in a ceremony small enough to fit inside a single breath. No marble floors or crystal chandeliers. No witnesses beyond Jessica, Luca, and 5 men who'd taken bullets for Giovanni over the years. There were no vows about perfection, just 2 people promising to choose each other even when the world made that choice heavy. "Lunch," Giovanni's voice said through the phone, smooth and decisive. "I'm stealing you for lunch. Luca wants to show you something." I smiled despite myself. "He's 14 months old. What could he possibly need to show me?" "Come home and find out," he said, and hung up like a man who never lost an argument in his life. Home. The word felt different now, not a fortress, not a cage, but a place where our son giggled through hallways and a baby I hadn't yet met turned somersaults beneath my ribs. I found them outside in the garden even though the February wind cut cold. Luca, bundled like a tiny astronaut, kicked a child-sized soccer ball with unsteady enthusiasm. Giovanni crouched behind him, coaching each movement with the reverence of someone watching a miracle take shape in real time. "Kick with the inside of your foot," he said. Luca kicked with his toe instead and shrieked with laughter as the ball wobbled away. "Again!" he demanded. Giovanni retrieved the ball with a patience I'd never seen in our first marriage, patience carved from fear, loss, and love too fierce to hide. "He's going to be trouble," I teased as I walked toward them. "He already is," Giovanni said, pulling me into his side with one arm. The sling was gone now, replaced by a long scar and a newfound softness that lived in him like a secret. "But he's ours." Luca ran to me, arms outstretched. I lifted him despite the tug in my lower back. For months pregnant, every movement felt like a small negotiation. But I wouldn't trade it, not the aches, not the fatigue, not the way Luca patted my belly and whispered, "Baby," with a gentleness too big for someone so small. "You'll teach your baby brother or sister soccer someday," I told him, pressing a kiss to his cold cheek. He nodded solemnly, as if accepting a job too important to refuse. We walked back inside when the wind picked up. Giovanni's hand rested at the small of my back, not possessive, not demanding, just present in a way that made me feel seen instead of managed. Inside, the house no longer felt like a stronghold that IT felt lived in. Luca's toys scattered across expensive rugs, baby clothes drying near the fireplace, the faint smell of coffee lingering from mornings spent together. Giovanni lowered himself onto the couch, rubbing his shoulder unconsciously. The wound healed but not forgotten. "You ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. I turned toward him. "Regret what?" "Letting me back in. Taking this life. Choosing us." He tried to make it sound casual, but I heard the quiet fear underneath, the fear no bullet or cartel could carve out of him. I sat beside him, took his hand and placed it on my belly where our daughter kicked, strong and certain. "No," I said softly. "I regret the years we didn't know how to love each other. But not this. Not now." He exhaled, something unspoken loosening inside him. "I regret every moment I kept you at a distance," he admitted. "Every day with Luca I didn't get to have. But regret what we have now? Never." The baby kicked again once, twice hard enough that his eyes widened with something like awe. She's strong, he whispered. She has to be, I said. She's yours. That night, after Luca fell asleep, I watched Giovanni assemble the crib for our daughter, his broad shoulders hunched, muttering at the instructions, refusing to let anyone help. When he finished, he sat on the nursery floor beside me, our backs against the wall, our hands tangled. We've survived too much to take peace for granted, he said. So we hold on to it. Together. And for the first time, peace didn't feel fragile. That it felt like something we'd fought for, bled for, built with our own hands. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, threats that lurked in shadows, decisions that weighed heavy, but we wouldn't face them alone. Because this quiet, imperfect, fiercely protected life was the ending we had earned, and the beginning we chose. My favorite part was when Giovanni, wounded, furious, but terrified of losing them, still pushed through the pain to whisper, "I came home," proving he would fight the entire world for his family. What was your favorite moment of justice or redemption in her story? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't miss more powerful, heart-gripping stories of love, danger, and second chances. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.